Welcome, everybody, to our Pace of Play webinar. Obviously, sitting with Ryan Gregg, and we are going to discuss the 2024 NCGA Pace of Play policy and a bit of the confusion, or try to clarify any confusion we may have had for when we are out on the golf course to administer this Pace of Play policy. And we are going to have this going live with, you can ask some questions in the comments or chat. And so please do that. And we will do our best to answer any further questions. We'll try to cover some basics here, especially the what in position and the maximum allowable time is, and how those two work together to enforce our pace of play policy. We want to discuss how we're speaking on the radio in order to come to agreement that we will speak about pace of play with players, and also where to speak with players, how to speak with players, how to resolve issues that may resolve themselves, and then how to approach and monitor groups and individual players before we are assessing any sort of penalties. Anything to add to that, Ryan?
No, that sounds good. Well, I think first thing we need to understand, there has definitely been some significant changes from our 2023 version to our 2024 version of our pace of play. Specifically, there are no longer any pre-established checkpoints at the beginning of the round as we once had. The 14-minute interval has been removed between groups, and it's not part of the policy. In position is really the new standard, and understanding what that means in relation on a par 3, par 4, and par 5. Warnings are now part of the policy. So there is a specific area that talks about warnings. In our previous policy, it specifically said there were no warnings. So understanding those are some significant changes from 2023 to 2024. Now, there are several things that have remained the same. Those are the maximum allowable time to complete a stroke, a hole, and a round still are part of the policy. Ready golf is encouraged. Players may still ask to have their groups monitored. Tournament officials and rovers are still monitoring groups. That still will occur in this policy. And players may still be penalized under Rule 5.6 for unreasonable delay. So, that is still very much part of the policy. What we do want to cover and to clarify some things is there's been some confusion about some of the messaging that's coming from our tournament officials to the players. And so we want to make sure that we're trying to be consistent about establishing the conversations we have with the players and the conversations that we have with the other tournament officials, and making sure that we're communicating clearly and there is no misconceptions about how we communicate and what we communicate to the players. We got to remind the starters that they have a very important role in the start of the tournament and giving the players the proper information. And it's important that they remind the players to stay under the maximum allowable time that'll be shown on a scorecard, or it will be even in the app that they're using to score on. And it's important that we remind them to keep up with the group in front of them. Remind that in position is important. But more than that, they shouldn't have to say. The players are still responsible for reading the policy and understanding it. Tournament officials may tell players if they are on time when asked, and may tell them if they are in position as defined. If somebody asks you, hey, how we're doing? Well, you can say that, it's now 8:05 and you have until 8:10 to complete the play of this hole to stay under your time. Or the group in front of you is just teed off on the next hole, so you're currently out of position. But you don't have to say anything more than that. But if they ask, you can tell them there's no reason to talk to the players if they're on time and in position, or on time or in position. So either one of those would be a situation in which we wouldn't talk to the players unnecessarily.
I think, what we're really trying to get at here is these major two boxes that have to be checked, which is the group must be out of position and the group must be over their maximum allowable time for us to really consider going to speak with them at any time. And that's, we really don't want any undue conversations with players. NCGA officials, we're out there, we're there to help. And that's what we want to portray that we're out there to do. And as you all know, players don't always think that that's why we're out there. And what we want to do is make sure that they know we're out there to help them. And we're only going to approach them under these circumstances when those two things are happening. And we are getting on the radio to discuss that with the rest of the committee before we're going to approach a player or stand, in a kind of officious position that sends the wrong signal. That's what we do not want to do, is send the wrong signal to our players. Our players are out there to enjoy themselves and have a good time. Yes, we need to keep them moving, but we really want to make sure that we all understand this. These two boxes get checked. We get on a radio. We find out the situation and what your role in that situation will become. Whether your role is now you've delivered the message and we will handle it from there with a rover and or staff, tournament chair, person that is nearby, or we need you to step in and either do the bump the nice way or give them the message that we want to deliver.
If a group is out of position and over their allowable maximum time, that's when we get on the radio to a rover. And if you don't have a rover, then we contact the staff person and or the tournament chair or even the rules chair and say, I have a group that has just completed a hole that is out of position and also over their maximum allowable time. And then at that point, the rover or the tournament chair, rules chair, or staff might say, hey, they're only a minute over. They just barely fell out of position. Why don't you just remind them to catch up with the group in front of them? Or they might know, hey, in 2 holes, there's a backup on that par 3. There's no reason to have that conversation with them or have a rover come over and do a formal monitoring. So we'll just go ahead and ask them to, hey, pick it up, just let you know. I know you had some trouble on this hole. Please try to do your best to catch the group in front of you. What we call a bump. So we would say, hey, tournament official on hole 15, go ahead and give them a bump. The rover, if required to, may catch the group and notify them that they are going to monitor them. This is a situation where they're out of position, over their time. A rover will come over, will monitor them, and they will specifically tell them. Let's say this happened after the 11th hole. Your group is over your maximum of allowable time and out of position with the group in front of you. You have until the 14th hole to get back into position. If you fail to do so, your group will be subject to penalty. I will be monitoring your group and be with you to help. So that's really the message you need to tell them. They need to be notified that they're out of position, that you're there to help them get back into position, but you will be monitoring their group. So what's it mean to monitor a group? Now the rover stepped in, notified them, hey, you're out of position. I've notified you on the 11th hole. I'm going to give you to the 14th hole to get back into position or under your maximum allowable time. Now, during that monitoring process, what are we doing? We got to be in a position that we can see what the players are doing, addressing the ball, their mannerisms around the ball, getting to the ball, just paying attention about everything they're doing, but we don't want to be in an overly officious manner, right? What we call visibly invisible, being in that position where we can monitor the groups and time them. Individual times to make a stroke is important, that we're monitoring. How long is it taking to play a stroke? Are they taking more than 40 seconds to play a stroke? And we're going to monitor how long it takes them to play each hole. Say we've given them 15 minutes to play the 12th hole, and they actually played the hole in 12 minutes. Okay, so they've played it under the amount of time that we've given them. And then we're going to take into consideration the time it takes to play those 3 holes that we've given them as part of their checkpoint. And rovers are going to document all the information they can about this group. Because if they do get into a penalty situation, we're going to need to give that information to the tournament chair or the staff or whoever's going to be handling it at the scorer's table. So if there's a ruling that takes place in the process of playing these 3 holes, time how long it takes to make that ruling, because that's all going to come into discussion when it comes time if they get penalized. We're going to need to know, hey, and it might show that one person in the group is the slow player. And if that slow player is affecting the rest of the group, and it's the reason they're not making their times, that information can be given to the tournament chair or the staff person at scoring so that they can deal with it and let them know that this player clearly is the one that deserves the penalty.
Well, I think what we were trying to clarify is that we talk about these established checkpoints, and these established checkpoints are, as we say, 2 to 3 holes, and where we are starting that checkpoint and where that checkpoint technically ends. So if you are, say, meeting a group to speak with them on the 11th tee box, and we say you have until the 14th hole to get back in position or play, these holes under the allotted time, that means the completion of that 14th hole. And that duration in there, we don't expect them that they will necessarily catch the group. We would like them to. They may not be under their maximum allowable time on the Raguzzi sheet itself, because they may have already been 10 minutes over time. But those holes have a specific duration to them. If they are coming in under that, making progress on those, we need to know that information in the monitoring, because that will go into the decision made. If they are making time, making an effort, and no individual players having bad times, we may give them another checkpoint and absolve them of the penalty during those 3 holes.
Yeah. So yeah, understanding that is really part of the component of understanding when a group deserves a penalty within the checkpoint. If they are playing those allotted holes under the time that we've given them, it should be taken into consideration, even though they may have not caught up with the group in front of them and they may not have gotten under their allotted time. So if the group fails to regain its position with the group in front of them, and it fails to play the allotted checkpoint holes under time, the rover will notify the group they have missed their checkpoint and are liable for a 1-stroke penalty. The group and the messaging would be, the group failed to make the checkpoint and is over the allotted time. This is your first missed checkpoint, and you're liable for a 1-stroke penalty on the 14th hole. You have until the 16th hole to regain your position. Your next mixed checkpoint will result in a 2-stroke penalty. So letting them know that you have missed this checkpoint, you're liable for that 1-stroke penalty. And we say liable because we will have a discussion. We will have a chance to gather the information from the tournament official. And they will have a discussion at the scoring area to find out what happened, or give the news of, we've got the information, we've gathered it, it's all checks out that you missed your time and you're out of position at the time that you completed the 14th hole, and the penalty is sticking for the entire group. Or we might decide at that point that it was one player that caused the delay, and that player will get the 1-stroke penalty. But then we give them another opportunity, since they haven't gotten back into position and they're not under their allotted time. We would say that you've got 2 more holes, and then hopefully they will have gotten back into position by then. If not, they'll get a 2-stroke penalty added to their score, so a total of 3. And then if something were to happen again where they failed to make that checkpoint and miss another checkpoint that we have established throughout the round, in that case, we'd be adding another 2-stroke penalty. That's kind of all I had in regards to kind of monitoring the group, talking to the group. But this is, I think, important to understand that, it's hard to get a penalty under this pace of play policy, but what it does is allow us to start talking to the players earlier, establishing checkpoints when a group has gotten out of position and off time. And it can happen in one hole where they had a ruling or a long ruling or several ball searches on a single hole that got them out of position over time. And hopefully with us jumping in right away and letting them know, hey, listen, we see that you have a problem. You are out of position. You are off your time. Let us help you get back in. And make them aware of it and versus what we were doing before of just hands off. You either make it to the 18th hole or you don't. So I like this policy a lot better. I hope you do too. And I hope we continue to learn from this process. And every time we do a tournament, we'll learn a little something else. So hopefully this clarifies some things. Like I said, and Gavin had said that, ask your questions here. If you have specific questions, ask them in the chat and we'll go from there.
I would, so we can do a kind of a little loose talk.
Yeah.
One of our big scenarios that happens out on the golf course, let's say, is we get first couple groups out and already there's kind of chirping on the radio when groups are, 1 minute off of this or almost falling out, and it's very early in the day. We really haven't seen how anything's going, and I know we all want to get ahead of all this very much, but I think that also is where a lot of players get frustrated with officials, where they've just gotten on the golf course. They've hit 5 shots or 15 shots completely, and it's already somebody's standing there. They're not sure why they're standing there. Are they going to talk to me? Are they not going to talk to me? And I think that's where we're trying to clear up in this policy of how and where and when to really discuss anything with a group. Getting on the radio to kind of notify there is a possible issue is always a good thing. So we're a bit aware. But I think that we need to kind of concern ourselves very specifically with these in position and our timings. And when it comes to either monitoring, or if you are the tournament official on a hole where you really see something, you may also want to be watching. Hey, I just watched somebody go play a ball from a penalty area or take relief from a penalty area, and the other 2 players just stood around. They knew they were taking the drop. They haven't played forward yet. Why aren't they playing forward? The whole hole is open. Being very aware of what's happening in that group, even if you aren't necessarily the specific person who is asked to monitor, that could be radioed ahead if this group is well behind and say, hey, I did notice these players take their sweet time getting back to their golf cart, or when other players are playing. And I know we spoke about why aren't these players playing when it's free to play. We are still advocating at all times, ready golf, play when ready, play when safe. And I think that's another thing to very much take into account when you're watching and monitoring players.
Yeah. And obviously it's all 99% of our events are stroke play. And so that's why ready golf is very much encouraged. Match play, that's different. And we'll maybe have a webinar on match play, pace of play policy later. But at least right now, it's important to understand that, I think in most part, our players, when talked to, do react and do make an effort to play faster. Some of the seasonal veterans will understand that I don't need to speed up. I know that I play my strokes under 40 seconds, but this guy over here is slowing our group down, and I understand that he'll get the penalty if we don't make our checkpoints. So, but I think we've seen a lot of progress with this. Once we talk to groups, they are making the effort.
The radio is really there for what we're doing. I know it comes back to talking about the radio, but we really want everyone, if there's a situation, to not take it upon themselves. We need to know information before we're going to step forward. And there's always been talk, why don't we penalize players? Why aren't we penalized? We have a policy. Why even have a policy if we're not going to penalize players? The policy isn't there so we can penalize players. We want them to get through the round without any hassles. We want them to get around the golf course. We want to save our golf courses we go to by getting our players off the golf course when we say we're going to get them off the golf course. We want them to work at that. But the policy is there if we do have an issue, but not so we can just enforce.
And I think that's the biggest error that we've come across so far this year, is just gathering all the appropriate information to penalize somebody. There's times where they deserve penalties, but we don't have the information that we need to penalize them because they weren't monitored correctly. We didn't have how long it took them to play strokes. We didn't have information on how long it took to play holes because we didn't monitor them on those holes in which we should have. So I think this policy helps us do that.
Yeah, I do too. So while this is on, we'll hopefully, if it's a little extended afterwards, we'll have some comments, or the comments that have been coming in prior, I will answer. We'll keep checking back for further comments because we are going to post this as you can go back to, and if your comments are, hey, you didn't cover this, you need to cover this, we may, as we said, do another one. We may do a match play, may amend what we did here and broaden it a bit, but we really wanted to get a conversation out there. You can also send me an email at any time, and I will forward them on to Ryan, so you bust it into his inbox at every 2 minutes. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us here. I know it was short and sweet, but that's what it should be. It's supposed to be a pretty straightforward policy to kind of get out to our players, get out to our officials, and hopefully this has helped kind of understand a few of the nuances that we maybe were missing beforehand.
Thank you, everybody.